There are nights when you don't even realize the moment you woke up. You only know that the darkness feels sharper than it should. Your brain a little too awake, your body not fully settled, as if something quietly flipped a switch inside you. From that moment on, the night feels thin. The sleep is light, easily disturbed, and hard to re-enter, even though you're still tired. I'm Dr. Jonathan Reed, and after more than 25 years working with adults over 60, I've learned something crucial. Your sleep doesn't fall apart because of age. It falls apart because your brain no longer receives the nighttime nutrients it once relied on to hold your sleep together. With time, the body loses the compounds that stabilize deep sleep. Melatonin precursors diminish, nighttime glucose becomes less steady, the nervous system becomes more reactive, and low-grade inflammation erodes sleep pressure faster than it should. But the part most people never hear is this. You can give those nutrients back easily, safely, and naturally through just 3 dry fruits. They aren't snacks. They're nighttime fuel designed by nature to support the very systems older adults struggle with. Stay with me until the end because dry fruit number 1 contains one of the strongest natural melatonin-supporting compounds I've seen in senior sleep care. And most people walk past it every day without realizing what it can do. Before we begin, please like this video, share it, and subscribe so more older adults can finally understand why their nights keep breaking apart and how to repair them. Let's start. Number 3, dates, your nighttime stability fruit. If there is one dry fruit that most adults over 60 overlook, it's dates. Not because they aren't aware of them, but because they assume they're too sweet or only good for energy. But here's the truth. For the aging brain, dates provide one of the most important things a nighttime meal can deliver. Stable, predictable fuel. And without that stability, the body does something it was never designed to do at 2 or 3 in the morning. It releases cortisol to wake you up. See, after 60, the brain becomes more sensitive to dips in nighttime glucose. Not large crashes, just small fluctuations that younger adults barely notice. But in seniors, even a slight drop can activate the sympathetic system. The chest feels lightly alert, the mind brightens too quickly, and the transition from deep sleep into wakefulness happens before you realize what's going on. That's why many older adults say, "I don't know why I woke up. It just happened." Their brain wasn't struggling with sleep. It was struggling with energy. This is where dates become surprisingly powerful. Their natural sugars don't behave like the quick spike crash pattern you get from desserts. Instead, dates provide slow-release carbohydrates carried along with fiber, potassium, and trace minerals that keep the night steady. No spike, no sharp fall, just a smooth curve that protects the brain from sending out a cortisol alarm. And dates bring something even more valuable. A nutrient combination older adults rarely get enough of at night. Magnesium, which helps relax muscle tension and quiets overactive neural firing. Potassium, which stabilizes the electrical signaling of nerves and supports normal heartbeat rhythm while you sleep. And polyphenols, which calm the microinflammation that often disrupts transitions between sleep stages. Together, they create the internal environment your brain needs to stay asleep, not restart itself. One of my patients, Margaret, 73, retired teacher, told me she lost the second half of the night for almost a decade. She said she would drift off easily, but sometime after midnight, she entered a strange half-awake state. Not exactly anxious, not exactly alert, just unable to stay deeply asleep. We looked at her evening routine. Her dinner was light, sometimes too light, nothing to sustain her through the night. I asked her to try 2 dates about 45 minutes before bed. Nothing extreme, nothing complicated. A week later, she said, "It's the first time in years I slept without checking the clock." The difference was simply this. For the first time in a long time, her brain wasn't running out of fuel. And that's what makes dates a uniquely senior-specific sleep food. They don't sedate you. They don't force your body into sleep. They give the brain what it needs so it doesn't panic at night. When you remove the panic, the cortisol spike fades. And when the cortisol spike fades, the night finally holds together. Here's how to use them correctly. Eat 2 to 3 dates, ideally about 45 minutes before bed. That timing allows your digestion to start releasing the slow carbohydrates, just as your brain begins the first deep sleep cycle. If you want to enhance the effect, pair the dates with a teaspoon of almond butter. Not required, but for many older adults, the added fat helps smooth the glucose curve even further. If you have diabetes, keep the portion to 1 or 2 dates and choose softer varieties like medjool, which tend to digest more predictably. What should you feel? Most people describe it as less interruption, less jumping awake, less drifting into that frustrating half-conscious state. Some feel a deeper, warmer sense of relaxation in their chest. Others notice that when they do wake briefly, they fall back asleep much faster. That's what steady nighttime fuel does. It removes the internal alarms and gives sleep a chance to continue naturally. So if you've been losing the middle of the night, not the beginning, not the end, but the quiet hours when your brain should be resting, dates may be the simplest way to restore that stability. Not a supplement, not a sedative, just a small piece of nutrition that reminds your body that it is safe to stay asleep. Number 2, walnuts, the neurocalming, night repair dry fruit. If there is one dry fruit that consistently surprises older adults with how deeply it affects their sleep, it's walnuts. Most people think of them as a heart-healthy nut, something you toss on a salad or snack on for omega-3s. But for the aging brain, walnuts do something far more important. They help regulate the neural stability required to stay asleep, especially after midnight. Why does this matter so much after 60? Because as we age, the electrical activity inside the brain becomes more sensitive, more easily triggered, and more easily disrupted. The membranes around nerve cells lose some of their flexibility, neuroinflammation rises, and the brain shifts into a pattern where small internal signals, the very ones younger adults sleep right through, begin to feel loud. You don't wake because something dramatic happens. You wake because your brain loses the quiet it once held automatically. Walnuts directly support the systems that maintain that quiet. The first reason is their natural omega-3 content, particularly ALA, which the body converts into DHA, the same fatty acid that forms the structural backbone of healthy brain cells. When DHA levels decline with age, the nervous system becomes more reactive. Thoughts feel sharper in the middle of the night. The body jolts awake from small cues. The transition between sleep stages becomes fragile. Restoring DHA through walnuts helps the brain regain that buffering capacity, softening the tendency to overreact. But walnuts do even more. They contain natural melatonin, not a supplement, not a synthetic dose, but the same molecule the pineal gland produces. For many adults over 60, melatonin production drops significantly, and the signals that guide the transition from light sleep into deeper cycles start to weaken. A gentle source of dietary melatonin can reinforce those signals without forcing the body into sedation. It supports the rhythm, not overrides it. Walnuts also influence the GABA pathway, the primary calming circuit of the brain. Healthy fats improve the fluidity of neural membranes, making GABA receptors more responsive, while the minerals inside walnuts help reduce overfiring in the central nervous system. This is why many seniors describe a specific kind of benefit. Not sleepiness, but the disappearance of that internal buzzing sensation that often shows up around 2 or 3 a.m. And let's not forget inflammation. Even mild neuroinflammation can fragment sleep, blocking smooth transitions between stages and triggering the early morning alertness so many older adults dread. The polyphenols in walnuts help quiet that inflammation, giving the brain a clearer pathway to maintain deep sleep through the night. One of my patients, Daniel, 69, former engineer, told me something I hear often. I don't wake up because of dreams or noise. It's like my brain taps me on the shoulder. He could fall asleep easily, but somewhere in the early morning hours, the internal quiet snapped. Not anxiety, not pain, just an abrupt shift into light wakefulness. We added 5 walnut halves to his evening routine, 1 hour before bed. He didn't expect much. But within a week, he told me, the nights feel smoother. I still wake up once, but I'm not fully awake. I drift back down. That is the difference walnuts make. They don't eliminate awakening entirely, Nothing natural does. But they reduce the intensity of those awakenings, and they make it far easier to return to sleep. Here's how to use walnuts correctly. Eat 5 to 7 walnut halves about 1 hour before bed. Not toasted, not roasted. Heat damages the omega-3s that make them so effective. Just plain natural walnuts. If your digestion allows, you can pair them with a small spoon of plain yogurt. The fat-protein combination slows absorption slightly, which enhances the calming effect for some older adults. But it is optional, not required. What you want is the brain-supporting fat, the natural melatonin, and the polyphenols, delivered gently and predictably as your nervous system downshifts for the night. Most people who try this notice 3 changes. They feel fewer full awakenings. They feel less internal tension when they do wake briefly. And the mornings feel clearer, not wired, not foggy, just steady. Walnuts don't push you into sleep. They create the conditions for sleep to hold. And when you're over 60, that often makes all the difference. Number 1, tart cherries. And for adults over 60, this is the closest thing to a natural sleep switch I've ever seen. Most seniors think melatonin is something that only comes in a bottle, a supplement, a pill, something you add because the body can't make enough on its own. But tart cherries turn that idea upside down. They don't just contain melatonin, they support the entire pathway that allows your brain to respond to melatonin correctly. And that distinction matters. Because after 60, the problem is rarely just not enough melatonin. It's that the brain's melatonin signaling becomes weaker, the transitions between sleep stages become less coordinated, and inflammation inside the nervous system interferes with the deep sleep cycles that used to hold all night. Tart cherries address every one of those issues at once. Let's start with melatonin itself. Tart cherries contain one of the highest natural melatonin concentrations found in any everyday food. Not artificial, not synthetic, fully bioidentical. When eaten in the evening, this gentle melatonin lifts the brain's own signal rather than forcing it in one direction. It reinforces the architecture. It helps the clock inside your hypothalamus shift smoothly into nighttime mode. But the real power of tart cherries comes from something else entirely. They're anthocyanins, the deep red pigments that give them their color. These compounds act like a calming blanket over the nervous system. They reduce low-grade inflammation in the brain, the kind that older adults rarely feel but almost always suffer from. Inflammation of this kind interrupts the brain's ability to stay in slow-wave sleep. It makes dreams lighter. It increases the likelihood of micro-awakenings. And it exaggerates the internal alert signals that pull older adults into wakefulness at the wrong time of night. Anthocyanins help restore the quiet. They protect the pathways that generate deep sleep. They make sleep stick. There's also a third mechanism, tryptophan availability. Tryptophan is the amino acid your body uses to build serotonin, which later becomes melatonin. But inflammation, stress, and aging can all push tryptophan down the wrong metabolic channel, away from serotonin and toward compounds that increase nighttime arousal. Tart cherries help redirect that pathway. More serotonin in the evening means smoother melatonin production later, and smoother melatonin means fewer early morning awakenings. To understand the real-world impact of this, let me tell you about Ruth, a 74-year-old retired teacher who came to me exhausted. Not because she couldn't fall asleep, but because she couldn't stay asleep. She told me, "I wake up 2 or 3 times a night, not fully awake, just aware enough to know I'm not resting." She wasn't anxious. She wasn't in pain. Her mind wasn't racing. Her sleep simply dissolved. We added a quarter cup of dried tart cherries to her evening routine, taken about 45 minutes before bed. Nothing exotic, nothing complicated. She kept everything else the same. 10 days later, she returned with a quiet smile. "I didn't realize how long it had been since I slept through the night," she said. "I used to check the clock without thinking. Now I wake up and see daylight." This is the pattern I see again and again. Not dramatic sedation, not knockout sleep, just continuity, the most valuable quality of sleep for older adults. Here's how to use tart cherries correctly. Eat a quarter cup of dried tart cherries or a small tart cherry tonic about 40 to 60 minutes before sleep. That timing allows the natural melatonin and anthocyanins to circulate as your nervous system begins its descent into the night. If you have reflux, choose the dried form rather than liquid. It's gentler. And avoid pairing tart cherries with dairy in the same moment, because dairy can blunt the absorption of certain polyphenols. Most older adults who add tart cherries to their evening routine notice three distinct changes. They stay asleep longer. The second half of the night becomes deeper and quieter, and their mornings feel less cloudy, less heavy, as if the brain finally completed work it hadn't finished in years. Tart cherries don't overpower the system, they restore it. And for adults over 60, that restoration often means the difference between a night that falls apart and a night that finally holds together. There's one more piece of this that most older adults overlook. Dry fruits can provide the nutrients your brain needs to hold sleep together, but the environment you give those nutrients determines how far they can work. That's why before bed, I teach my patients a simple technique that calms the nervous system faster than breathing exercises, stretching, or herbal teas. And it takes less than 2 minutes. It's called warm hand immersion, and it works because of a reflex built into your biology long before sleep science existed. When the hands are placed in comfortably warm water, tiny blood vessels open, circulation increases through the forearm and wrist, and a subtle but measurable shift occurs in the autonomic nervous system. Sympathetic activity, the part of your system that makes your chest feel a little too alert at night, begins to quiet down. Parasympathetic activity, the part that slows the heart and prepares the brain to release melatonin, begins to rise. For adults over 60, this shift is especially valuable. Aging doesn't remove the ability to sleep. It simply makes the nervous system more reactive and more sensitive to internal noise. That's why small irritations wake you. That's why nights feel fragile. And that's why calming the system before you lie down matters as much as what you eat. Warm hand immersion gives your brain the signal it often struggles to send on its own. It's safe. It's time to let go. Here's how my patients do it. About 10 or 15 minutes before bed, fill a small basin or even a kitchen bowl with warm water. Not hot, just pleasantly warm. Place both hands inside up to the wrists. Close your eyes if you like, but you don't need to meditate or focus on your breath. All you have to do is let the warmth soak in. Within 30 seconds, the body begins shifting gears. Heart rate drops slightly, breathing deepens. Facial muscles release tension without you consciously relaxing them. And inside the brain, activity moves away from problem-solving networks and into the slower, more rhythmic patterns that support sleep. 2 minutes is enough. Some patients enjoy 3 or 4, and that's fine. The key is consistency. Over a week or two, this tiny ritual teaches your nervous system what bedtime is supposed to feel like again. Not a transition filled with alertness or restlessness, but a quiet descent your physiology recognizes. And here's where it connects back to the dry fruits. When your parasympathetic system rises, your body absorbs nutrients differently. Dates stabilize glucose more smoothly. Walnuts direct their fats toward neural repair more efficiently. Tart cherries convert their compounds into melatonin pathways with less resistance. It's not the warm water doing the work. It's the environment it creates, an internal landscape where the foods you've eaten can support sleep without fighting upstream. So think of this routine as the doorway to your night, not a relaxation trick, not a spa ritual, but a biological cue, a signal that turns down the noise, lowers the demands on your system, and invites the body to use what you've given it. 2 minutes, warm water, quiet hands, and a night that has a much better chance of holding together all the way to morning. Here's a simple nighttime checklist to help you put everything together. Nothing complicated, just a quiet sequence that prepares your body for a full night of uninterrupted rest. About an hour before bed, take 2 to 3 dates. They give your brain a steady flow of fuel so it doesn't trigger a stress response later in the night. Then have 5 to 7 walnuts. Their calming fats and natural melatonin help steady the nervous system as you head toward the second half of the night. Follow with a quarter cup of dried tart cherries. This is your gentle melatonin reinforcement, the signal that tells your brain, hold the night together. After that, take 2 minutes to warm your hands in comfortable water. No strain, no effort, just enough heat to shift your body into a quieter rhythm. And finally, turn off bright screens for the last 20 minutes. Let the mind dim down so the nutrients you just consumed can do their work. If there's one thing I hope you take from this video, it's this. Your body has not forgotten how to sleep. It's simply been trying to do its job without the nighttime support it once had. Dates steady the fuel your brain relies on. Walnuts calm the neural pathways that decide whether sleep holds or breaks. And tart cherries give your internal clock the signal it needs to carry you through the second half of the night. 3 small foods, each repairing a different piece of the system that age tends to weaken. And when those systems reconnect, the nights become quieter, the mornings become clearer, and the fear of waking at 3 a.m. begins to fade. Give this routine a week, just 7 nights. Most older adults begin to feel a shift long before that. If this helped you, please like this video, share it with someone who struggles at night, and subscribe so you don't miss the next guide in this series. And tell me in the comments, which dry fruit will you start with tonight? Your sleep wants to return. Now you know how to help it.